I never thought I'd do another anime review again, but here we are. So recently, Netflix released a show about the fighting game Tekken, and I'm just gonna tell it how it is. It's pretty bad, but it's not as bad. You see, the good thing about bad animes is that you can still enjoy watching it, and if you don't, you just drop it. The problem with good animes that is bad later on is that it's hard to drop, and it leaves a very negative impression after you watch it. Going into this anime, I already knew what expectations I should have with shows that almost only focus on fight scenes. So with animes like Dragon Ball, One Punch Man, Lilith's Cord, God of High School, I knew that I'm basically gonna watch the show with my brain turned off. And it seems like that's the way to watch this, because frankly, most of these fighting shows have very hollow plots with very little focus on character development. Now, there's no time to really get attached heavily to the characters, especially since this is a fairly short series. Everything just kind of felt like a speed run to get to the next fight scene. The characters are very bland, interactions are lame, Jin and Jun was okay, and even that was kind of iffy. The story just comes and goes way too quickly to appreciate anything, which is probably why they put 10 of the same flashbacks at the end of the show. Maybe that's the producer's way to compensate and remind you that they were trying to give a plot for a solid 2 minutes at the first episode. But that's not what happened at all. It was just really annoying to sit through the flashbacks. Now, I'm not a Tekken lore connoisseur, but I know that this isn't really a very narrative-driven game. It's hard to produce a good adaptation when the source material is not that good to begin with, so I'm not gonna go too hard on the story. It is what it is, basically. There's also things like the voice acting. Maybe it's because most of the viewers are accustomed to the Japanese voices, since that's what Jin and Heihachi actually speaks, but my god, dude, the original version of the show sounds like the dubbed one. Like, this isn't really that big of a deal since you can just swap the dubs, but I think it's just a very funny thing to point out. Now, when it comes to the visuals of the show, I thought that it was pretty good. Movements are fluid, I like how different the characters look. It's not like most animes where their hair is literally the only thing setting the two characters apart. And I can also appreciate the fact that the actually made characters look like they're actually fighters. In contrast to Tekken 7, where every female character is practically a Barbie doll. Tekken Bloodline, I would say, had a little more freedom with how they designed their characters. I also liked how they incorporated the hit effects from the game and just slap it in the show every time a big hit happens. It's the little things that kind of elevate the experience for people that already play the game. And I know that this is beating a dead horse at this point, but very quickly, I just want to talk about the triangle shading. Personally, I didn't really notice it. I feel like this is one of those things where if you're actively trying to look for something, then it's going to stand out. I had the triangles in mind at the beginning of the first episode, but literally after a couple of minutes, I don't even remember paying attention to them. Objectively, it looks bad, but it didn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. Especially once the characters are in motion, it all kind of fades into the action, which is what I want to talk about next. So this is a fighting game adaptation, so obviously this is going to be the bread and butter of the show. And as for the action, I'd say that it's actually the strongest element of the show. But that's not a very high bar. Thankfully, it's quite above the cut compared to the other elements in the series. I really like the fact that the fights mostly stay grounded. It's not over the top, but it still conveys power behind every hit. So they took the moves from the game, which is a cool little nod for the players. And I remember Ling eating a chain grab from King and me just subconsciously trying to break the grab. It's like 1 + 2, 1, or fucking 2. It was just very fun to see the moves being incorporated into the series, and it was just very fun to see the action unfold. The camera was a little disorienting at times with the amount of times it spins around the characters, but the choreography more than makes up for it, I feel like. The only gripe I had with the fight scenes is how short they were. I understand that they don't have all the time in the world to fit longer fight scenes, but I kind of wish that they did something different to make it not look like the characters are always on 1 HP. Other than that, I feel like the action is pretty good for what it does. Overall, I'd say for a video game adaptation, this one is definitely far from the worst. You have a very generic revenge plotline, very straightforward, but once you acknowledge the fact that this isn't really a story worth taking very seriously, I'd say that it's actually a pretty decent viewing experience. I went into it expecting tons of fights, and so I would argue that that's the reason why I didn't think it sucked all that much. And for that reason, I would give the show a 6 out of Arcane.